La, 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 la. Hey, this is a song for my haters. Yeah, y'all got me feeling like the greatest.
Throw, dropping the pass, in trouble. He gets the pass away over the middle, and it's picked off at the 20-yard line. Dansby makes the interception.
Welcome back. You're tuned into another episode of Press Coverage Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, E. Dansby. We've been gone for a few weeks, but we're back now, and I got a special guest sitting in with us. Former Loser C. Laney head coach, a state champion head football coach for the Burke County Bears, and now the voice of CP off the bench, Northern Coach Eric Parker. Coach, how you doing this morning?
Man, I'm great. It's good to be here on a Saturday morning. You know, this time of year, I'm usually stressed out, so I'm still getting used to that, being relaxed on Saturday morning,
right.
Not replaying 50 different plays in my head from last night. So yeah, man, I'm still new to this, but I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, I understand that, Coach. Like you said, you know, breaking down that film the next morning, whether a win or a loss, it can be sometimes stressful. And as I've never been a coach, but as a player, you know, I only imagine what you guys go through.
Yeah,
Coach.
and it never stops. It's just a continual process. And people think that, all right, if you win a ball game, it's not that big of a deal. But man, you're always thinking about, all right, what we did last night in this situation, man, we got to get better because it's not going to allow us to be successful down the road, you know. So it like I say, it never stops. It was a lot of pressure, and it was a lot of intensity, and I loved it. But you know, I will say this is kind of refreshing.
Right. I bet it is, Coach. After all those years of just being on the sideline, I know something different is always good sometimes. But Coach, before we dive into your amazing journey as a coach, I first want to get your initial thoughts on one of your favorite rival, the Thomson Bulldogs. They sit at 6-1 right now. They're trying to repeat as state champion. Their head football coach, Michael Youngblood, someone that you know good on a personal level, coached with you back in 2011 on y'all state championship team. You know, what's your thoughts on Thomson this year, and what's it be like this? I guess words of advice you can give them to try to repeat.
Well, you know, there's no perfect way to do anything. Okay. And I tell people that I liked what I liked, I believed in it, and I think you see that every Friday night with a group like Thomson. They believe in what they believe in. Coach Youngblood has always just believed in being real physical on defense.
Gotcha, yeah.
Being able to run the football and just being mentally and physically tough.
Gotcha.
And his philosophy is a philosophy that a lot of us that run in that same circle has always believed, that when you are those things, you give yourself a chance most nights.
Right.
And I think because of that, they're definitely going to have a chance to repeat. But, you know, one thing about a state championship or a national championship or, you know, probably even a Super Bowl, somewhere along the line, you're going to run into somebody as good as you, if not a little bit better.
Right.
So what you do is you start preparing for that stuff back in January and February in the weight room, out on the track.
Gotcha.
You're conditioning. And so I think what I see when I watch Thomson play, when I competed against them, I always knew that was coming. That part of who they were was going to show up, you know, in those big moments. And because of that, I do think that they're going to be right there, you know, when it's all said and done.
Right.
But obviously there's going to be some teams along the way that, you know, you got to catch a break with.
Gotcha.
Or they need to make a mistake, or maybe you even have to play above your head a little bit.
Right.
And that's not knocking anybody. That's just the truth of the matter.
Right, that's just football.
Yeah, I remember in 2011 when we won the state championship, I think that we were good enough to compete and beat anybody in our classification. But it sure didn't hurt us when Carrollton got beat by Gainesville.
Right.
Well, I'm sorry, by Peach County. They got beat by Peach County, and Sandy Creek got beat by Gainesville.
Right.
Those were the two teams all year long that we were thinking, man, if we're going to win this, we're going to have to go through these two.
Yeah.
They both got beat, so that was the break we needed. And the way we played matched up really good against the semifinal team, Gainesville, and then the state championship game, Peach County. So, yeah, it works like that, man. It does. So I think all you can worry about is the here and now, and I think Coach Youngblood and Thomson is doing a good job of worrying about the here and now and just trying to get better week by week. And whatever happens at that point, it happens.
Yeah, you're right, Coach. And like you said, man, they're going to be a team that's going to be around at the end. So we're going to see how it's going to finish.
That's
out.
right.
Like I said, 6-1 right now, kind of getting to the meat of the season.
Right
here. Now these playoffs going to start, coming upon us, I think, in about a month or so.
Yep.
So, Coach, diving right into your journey, man, I know you're from South Georgia.
Yeah.
Going up down in that rural South part of Georgia. Football is culture down that way.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So where did you, just tell us a little bit about your upbringing and where did you find your love for football?
Well, it's funny because, back in the early 80s, late 70s, when I was in elementary, middle school, whatever, it was just normal that your best athletes, they played everything.
Gotcha.
The specialization is something that has come about recently, but if you had a great football player, then there was a good chance that he probably played basketball, ran track, whatever. So that was the thing in South Georgia, plus the fact, let's be honest, it wasn't a whole lot of stuff vying for our attention. You played sports or you got a job. That was pretty much your two choices. So down at Mitchell Baker High School in Camilla, Georgia, we just had a real good run for a lot of years. Mm-hmm. And, man, I just, I fell in love with it. And it didn't hurt. My dad was the basketball coach at Mitchell Baker for a couple of years. I think my freshman year in high school, he retired.
Gotcha.
But I had spent a lot of time on team buses and at practices, and man, I just loved everything about the culture. Yeah, I was a coach's kid, man, a gym rat, and so obviously I would rather play, but it just reached a level like it's going to with most people. When you start talking about after high school or even after college, your playing days were over. Yeah, you just didn't have what it take, or the breaks didn't work. So I always wanted to be around the game, and I started in college. I started doing some student coaching.
Gotcha.
Got a chance to hook up with some of the local middle schools and rec departments, and man, it's just been in my blood. Yeah. And when I came out of college, got a chance to go to Washington Wilkes. Oh, okay. That was my first gig, and just kind of been doing it ever since, up until this past year. 33 years worth, man. It was a run. Man.
Yeah, and I know it is, Coach. Like I said, had tons of success, and we'll get into that. But like you said, just starting out somewhere, coming from having that coaching background. Now you're thrust into it, retired now. But like I said, it's being around the game a lot. Yeah, puts you in it. And coming from, like I said, coming from South Georgia, not a whole lot to do there as a kid, not really in the inner city. So sports is always the way. And you're playing there, the football players play basketball, and the basketball players play baseball. And now we don't see that parity anymore in sports, in high school sports and youth sports as well.
Well, the big difference is now, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, it's just the reality of it. When a kid has a sport now that he or she loves more than the other, they can play that sport year round.
Yeah, there we go.
See, back in the day, once football season was over with, it was over with. You just, you could train, but that was it. When basketball season was over with, it was over with. When baseball. Now with AAU and travel ball, a kid could literally play basketball or football or run track year round.
Yeah.
And so, and I have some serious issues with that, but that's neither here nor there. Because I think that there's a major burnout factor that we're going to start to see with people doing that. But yeah, so back, during the time that I was coming along in high school, it was just, hey man, we play it all anyway, so let's just go have fun.
Yeah. Whichever sport, whether spring, fall, summer, we're going to play
whatever sport's going on.
Play.
Yeah, that's right.
Now you see that burnout factor because, me, coming back here from Minnesota 3 years ago, and I got into some training outside of here in the podcast.
Right.
And I had a really, really good athlete, man, and these guys actually a family member of mine, and got into training him, man. Great athlete, was going to be great. Coming was a great middle school running back / wide receiver type, Tyreek Hill type body style. And, played the sport from part one all year round, from a youngster all the way up into an older teenager. And I feel like you said, now you're seeing a burnout factor. I think he just wore out. And then he had injuries along the way. Tore his ACL once, and kind of retweaked it again. I think that just kind of took a toll on him, and that was just like a burnout factor because all the thing he worked on all year round was football. Didn't have a lot of parity. Never tried to play basketball, never really got into baseball. Many of us African Americans, we really never try to get into baseball. It's kind of changing now, but that's what we see. We just don't pick up the diamond like that. It's just not. It's just kind of not in us. It's been the culture, but it is changing, Coach.
Yeah, what they need to do is look at some of the contracts. Some of those Major League Baseball guys are playing. I was telling a baseball coach this yesterday, as a matter of fact. So I'm not a baseball guy. I don't have anything against sport. I just don't know a lot about it.
Right.
But every now and then with my family, I'll go up to the Braves game and we'll sit there and watch the Braves play. And the one thing that jumps out at me, and I know nothing about the strategy, it's just all kind of interesting, but the one thing that jumps out at me at that level of baseball, those are still professional athletes.
Yeah.
When I see an outfielder flip his hips and run and track one down on the warning track, I know that person could have very easily been a DB or a wide receiver at a high level, or probably was in high school.
Right.
So, at the end of the day, I'm a believer that playing multiple sports just help your skill set.
It does.
It just helps your hand-eye coordination, movement, that sort of thing. And then the other thing about burnout, too, and I think you see it more now because of the structure of youth sports, is – the last degree I got, it required us to really take a hard look at our coaching philosophy and practices.
Gotcha.
It wasn't so much that we had someone telling us what to do, but it required us to defend our practices. It required us to look at how we organized and how we set up our workouts and our off season. And then we had to use actual research. We had to use numbers. We had to use, objective data.
Right. So getting more into the analytics.
Analytics of defending why what we were doing was the best way to do it. And I'm going to be honest with you. What I found out is that there were a lot of things that I was doing just off of tradition or trend.
Right.
It really had nothing to do with the numbers.
Right.
And I think that's a big thing about leadership, period. I think a lot of times we have to really analyze why do we do what we do. And what I found out is that we probably were overworking our kids in certain areas.
Gotcha.
Now, that doesn't mean that they needed to just be sitting out doing nothing, but there were some things that we were doing that probably was contributing to some burnout.
Yeah.
And so we made some adjustments based off of and I'm not a guy that likes for research to tell me what to do, because I'm a believer that research and numbers can be manipulated.
Gotcha.
And that if I really feel strongly about something, I can find numbers to defend it.
Yeah.
But what I was finding out is that you're right. I really had no defense of why we were doing some of the things that we're doing, other than I've always done it that way. This is what everybody else is doing. Yeah. Or I'm afraid if I don't do it, I'm going to let somebody else get ahead of me.
Right.
So I think when it comes to youth sports and it comes to what we're doing in athletics, especially when you start talking middle school, high school level, I think we need to take a look at some of what we're doing. And I know that's kind of off subject, but I'm going to tie it back into when you go back and you think about the great athletes of the 80s and the early 90s.
Right.
Man, they were just multi-sport athletes.
Right.
This was male and female.
Right.
You didn't have a guy that was just team basketball for about 5 months and then AAU basketball for the next,
He was just
7.
Good.
Yeah.
You look at a Deion Sanders, who was a pretty good basketball player coming up in high school. Obviously a good football player and a baseball player, because we see him, time with the Cowboys and playing, with the Braves, Atlanta Falcons and stuff like Bo Jackson as well. Some of those guys in the 80s. We've seen Michael Jordan do it, maybe not as successful.
When you think locally here, just in Augusta, I know the guys that I have dealt with that were really good players. When you start talking about the J.K. Sabbs, let's go back and look at Deion Grant and some of these. These guys were just as good at another sport.
Right.
But nobody ever talks about J.K. was a really good basketball player. And Deion Grant was on the basketball team that played for the state championship. So, you don't see much of that anymore.
Right.
And, man, I hate that because,
me too. Me too. Like I said, numbers and analytics have taken over everything, even down to when you're talking about on the field. And when I say on the field, I come up in your era of coaching, and, when we started out and you're talking about playing physical football, Oklahoma drill is what kind of set the standard at practice. Now you don't see a lot of Oklahoma anymore, because you see, head injuries, neck injuries, and does Oklahoma really teach you how to tackle?
Well, it's not, let me say this, and football is football, but the way the game is being played now is totally different.
Right.
If you go and you count how much stuff happens in between the tackles now as opposed to what was happening in between the tackles 15 years ago, there's a big difference.
There's a big difference, yeah.
And
Everything's played on the perimeter.
Oh, yeah, and so now, I know defensive coaches are not going to spend a lot of time on things like Oklahoma because at the end of the day, and this playing the position you played, the game of defense is about tackling in space now. You got to get athletes on the ground one-on-one and, tracking drills and that sort of stuff. So, yeah, the game changes, and I think that's where we have to go back and we have to look because if you're one of those defensive coaches that's spending 80% of your time on playing defense inside the tackle, then how are you going to handle the quick screens? How are you going to handle the jet sweeps? How are you going to handle the crossing mesh routes? I got you. So, yeah, the game has changed, man. It's changed.
The game has definitely changed.
And it happens in all sports.
Right.
Again, I'm not really a basketball guy anymore. I coached a long, long time ago. But, I remember once upon a time, man, you just don't take threes.
Yeah,
you don't.
Big man was the
the
big man.
But now, if you can't shoot threes, it's kind of hard to win.
Right. Now the game, but like you said, now the game of basketball has now become kind of like positionless because of how Steph Curry has kind of revolutionized the game of basketball. It's now positionless, and LeBron James has a kind of a factor to play with that when we're talking about positionless basketball. But you can definitely tie it all into Steph Curry and how the kids shoot. Centers can shoot now. Power forwards can shoot now. Back in your time,
I'm a 76ers fan, man, and Embiid standing out there shooting threes just drive me crazy, man.
Yeah, and he can hit them and knock them down, but more effective in the paint.
Yeah, but I'm old school, man. Go put your back on, go down to the block and put your back to the basket.
Yeah, and I'm kind of like them. Kind of coming up in that Kobe and Shaq. You seeing Shaq just dominating down low, and just, it wasn't fun to watch for probably kids today, but back during that time when I was coming up, man, it was exciting, man.
But I think what we're getting at, and this is just the coaching part of it, how do you stay true to your old school values, but make the adjustment so that you stay relevant?
Yeah. Gotcha.
Because you have to do that. You have to be able to stay relevant.
Right.
Because if not, then the game does have a tendency to pass you by.
Exactly.
But at the same time, man, I can't just get away from the game of football and we get a chance to make our big hits, when we get a chance to be physical.
Right.
And I think, me and you were talking before we start the podcast. I'm just a believer that those lessons and those decisions that you have to make in sports, they follow you off the field. How do you stay true to those old-fashioned, tried and true values, but do it in a society that's moving different,
Gotcha.
So, those are the type of things that I think as a player, as a coach, as a former athlete, we're just faced with every day, man. And, those were kind of the things that I enjoyed about the game, passing not only the strategy and the competitive edge along to my guys, but showing them this is something you're going to be faced with even long after your playing days.
Like you said, the game of football definitely teaches us how to deal with adversity long after we played the game. So, Coach, getting back into your journey, know you spent some time at Georgia Southern, man. Like you say, coach some youth football, was able to go to Washington Wilkes. At some point, you get the offensive coordinator job at Social Circle. That's out near going towards Atlanta in the Greene County area, something like that.
It's between Madison, Georgia, and Covington.
Yeah. Right. So definitely heard of it before. So Coach, obviously, you do great as an OC there, and then in 1997, Laney comes calling. So, what just kind of played in your decision to take that head coaching job at Laney?
All right, so this will be interesting. There's a few people that have heard this before, but when I was at Social Circle and I was the offensive coordinator, Josie was rolling.
They were.
Well,
mid-90s.
Coach John Starr was married to my first cousin.
Okay.
So John and I would talk quite often, once a week, once every 2 weeks.
Gotcha.
And I know this started before John ever won the state championship at Josie. He had gotten them in the playoffs and they were rolling along. And he would always tell me, say, look, man, if that Laney job ever comes open, man, you need to jump on that. Right. You need to jump on it. And so I'm like, man,
we're
whatever.
Just talking.
And so anyway, man, they went on and won the state championship, and he would just double down. He was just like, listen, Coach Smart's doing him a favor. He really didn't want to be the head football coach. He does basketball, but they couldn't find a coach. I think he's going to give it up. Man, you really need to take a look at this Laney job. And then he said something that was real profound. He said something that ended up being true. He said something that really just piqued my interest. He said, you know, the reason I'm pushing this Laney job at you is because they have the same kids we have.
Right.
There's no difference between Laney and Josie when you talk about the student body and the number of athletes. He said it's the same school, basically.
Right.
He said, so what we did here, I think somebody can go in there and do that over there. So, man, you know, I just got to thinking. I had only been an offense coordinator for a couple of years, and I started thinking, well, when it comes to head coaching, man, I'm going to be way down on the list.
Right.
Well, because of the fact that we're talking inner city, a lot of people were kind of afraid of taking that. So when the job finally came open, there just wasn't a lot of people that applied for it.
Okay.
And so John even put in a good word for me. So when my name went in, they recognized it because of Coach Starr. Coach Starr was the guy in Richmond County at the time because they were winning. And again, that goes back to a lot of times it's who you know, man.
Yeah,
you know,
the not what you know, but who you know.
Yeah, yeah. And so, you know, it was one of those things where my resume was okay, but I really hadn't done anything. But I got in. I got a chance to share my vision of the program and what I wanted to do. And it was exactly what the principal, Dr. Utley, was looking for at the time.
Right.
And so they gave me the job. And, man, I was just excited, you know. I was like, wow, you know, I'm going to get a chance to be a head coach. And I had my little portfolio of all the things we were going to do. I knew all my offenses and defenses that I was going to run. And, man, I jumped in there and nothing worked like I planned.
Yeah. And that's what we're going to get into next. So, like I said, you take the job in 1997. You taking on a program that hadn't made the postseason since 1990. So that's 7 years. You know, in the previous 4 years before you got there, they're 9-31. So, you know, what was this? Like you said, you had your playbook, you had everything you wanted to run. They're 9-31. So you're trying to go in here and revamp a culture, actually create a culture. So what was kind of this, your mindset coming into Laney, trying to create a culture within the inner city of Augusta?
Well, here was the thing. I really didn't understand what you're asking me for about 2 years.
Gotcha.
I was like most young coaches. I had worked for some really good head coaches, had been around some good football. But in my mind, I could do it or I could do it better.
Right.
I just had all the answers. I knew offensively, defensively, what was going to be perfect for us. I knew what we were going to do. I knew what the pregame ritual was going to look like.
Right.
I already had the pregame speeches made out. And so, yeah, that was my thinking that they've got pretty good athletes. So when I go in and put my expertise to it, we're going to take off and we're going to rock and roll right off the bat. And I think that's the mentality a lot of times we have when we go from that assistant coach's chair to the head coach's chair.
Right.
And I had it.
Right.
So when I tell young coaches going in now, I'm not telling them something I heard. I tell them what I know. Right. And I just, you know, I was very, very confident.
Yeah. And like you said, I'm not one that coach, but I have been in some locker rooms on, you know, college level and in professional level. And then I feel like a lot of the young coaches, what they fail to realize, and I've been around some young coaches, you know, and they kind of relate to you because they're younger. You know, since I'm being in college, I'm in my younger 20s, they're in their mid to late 20s. So we kind of relate. And I feel like what they fail to realize is that you have to be a leader of men. And that's what you see like a coach, like a Mike Tomlin. Not to say he doesn't know the X's and O's, but when you talk about being a head coach, to being a leader of men and being that voice in the locker room to young men, because, you know, you have a different mixture. And but you know, in high school, it's kind of about the same age, but in the professional locker room, it's a mixture of grown men and men trying to become men. And so you have to have that strong figure, not only in the pro, but also in high school.
Well, let me tell you what happened is, and I said all of that about, man, I was ready to go. Nobody could tell me anything. And then we jumped out there the first year and we went 0-10. Gotcha. And the second year we went 1-9.
Yeah.
And so now it's at this point that I had to come to grips with I was not a very good leader. I knew some X's and O's, the strategy.
Right.
I understood the game. I even had what I think now is a pretty good vision of what I wanted. And Coach Lemuel Lackey was my assistant head coach and defensive coordinator. And he and I were kind of in the same boat, like, all right, this did not go well.
Gotcha.
And so, it started out with blaming the system, blaming, the kids and their motivation. But at the end of the day, I had to look in the mirror and I had to accept the fact that everything that I wanted to do, everything that I felt like we needed to do, I was not getting it done. And so what I had to learn, and I still speak this now to groups when I go get a chance to talk to them, that name tag on the door, that desk plate sitting on that desk, those resumes and degrees and everything else does not make you a leader.
Gotcha.
It does not make you a person that people just want to automatically follow.
Right.
And so that's the part that I didn't understand until we jumped out and we were 1-19 after 2 years. And now there's doubt creeping in. So I had to go and I had to really do some soul searching. And the other thing that I had that I would encourage anybody that's going to jump into a leadership role like coaching is to have some people in your circle that can look you in the eyes and tell you the truth, even when it's uncomfortable.
Right.
And so I had a coach that I coached with. He was a defense coordinator, one of the better defense coordinators in the state. And so I was just rambling on and on about, man, the kid's not dedicated. It's not real, important. So I had every excuse in the world. And he told me something that hurt my feelings at the time. He said, man, you need to resign. You need to get out of the way. I'm like, what do you mean? He said, what you're telling me is that you can't get it done. You do know that there are people out there that can't wait to sit in that seat. And some of them are capable of getting the job done.
Right.
So I'm like, wait a minute now, He said, no. He said, when you signed on to become a leader. And when you signed on to become a leader, you were going to figure out a way to influence the people on your staff and influence the kids in your locker room, and it's not getting done. And so what I had to learn was, and this is where my career took off, and I thank the Lord for this, people don't follow you because of what you have done and what you say. People follow you because they see an opportunity to get better. They see you as being somebody that can help them get where they're trying to go.
Gotcha.
And so what we had to do is we had to really start to set standards. We had to really show our kids and demonstrate to them the reason we're in the shape we're in is because here's what we're getting. If we're going to ever get to that winning, if we're going to ever get to the playoffs, if we're going to ever get to playing the type of football that we think we can play, then we're going to have to develop some standards by which we're going to perform, by which we're going to train, how we're going to live in the school, outside the school. And then when we can get to that point, then everybody's going to get what they want.
Gotcha.
And so we set those standards, and my job then became as a facilitator to make sure that I constantly reminded people of the standards when we met them, when we didn't meet them.
Gotcha.
And so that was the defining turning point of my career. And what happened in year 3, and we only went 3-7, but boy, we had some teams on the rope. We just didn't understand how to finish them.
Yeah, gotcha.
But, we were able to go back and show our kids, look, when we did this, this is the success we had. You see it.
Right.
When we didn't do that, this is what happened to us. And so, we had some guys that took that, went into the 4th season, and we never looked back. We went to the playoffs every year after that.
Yeah,
we went to the state semifinals.
Yeah.
And so what I had to learn was that the difference between failure and success started and ended with me. And that's what happened when, I came in thinking, man, we've got what it takes to win. And that ended up being true.
Right.
The reason we couldn't get to it is because the leadership was not good.
Gotcha.
And that fell directly on my shoulders. And so I tell guys going in, man, I know you know offense. I know you know defense. I know you know how to put a practice schedule together. I know you know how to script. But, man, can you develop standards and hold guys to them, including yourself? That's where your real success is going to happen.
Gotcha.
And so, once I got that down pat, man, I just felt like, yeah, we could go into places,
Right,
identify what really was important.
Right.
And we could get guys playing at a high level. And that's what you're seeing when you see the Kirby Smarts of the world, when you see the Nick Sabans of the world. I think
Right.
you're going to see it with the Deion Sanders
I
of the
believe we are
world,
too as well.
the Mike Tomlins, and the people that they are guys that have helped develop standards, and they do not let their guys deviate from it.
Right.
And so now I'm not putting myself on that level at all, but it's
Right,
just
but
the concept
Yeah,
of,
the concept. Yeah.
hey, man, this is what we're doing.
Right.
We're not going to change it. Starting with me, I'm going to be accountable. You're going to be accountable. We're going to be accountable. And you see what happens.
That's it, Coach. And like you said, the leadership aspect, it always starts at the top, and then
Starts
it
at the top.
and it trickle down to the bottom. And like you said, once you realize that, Coach, your career started to take off. Like you said, 4-26 in your first 3 seasons.
Yeah.
And then after that, in 2000, we started to see the change.
Yeah.
You guys, make the playoffs. And then in 2002, you guys get a shot at the Georgia Dome, playing with a guy that was Mr. Georgia, like a J.K. South, being at the helm, but a lot of other great players as well. So, Coach, just kind of tell us about, of course, we heard about the growing pains, but now we get into a little success. So, kind of just tell us about, the 2000, leading up to that 2002 season, in the 2002 season and within the 7, when you guys was able, to go to the Georgia Dome and compete in the state semifinal against Dublin.
All right, so just a few minutes ago, we were talking about standards. We were talking about developing standards and living by them and making sure that everybody was accountable to each other about them.
Right.
Well, that doesn't happen by the coach creating and maintaining the culture. That happens when your players do it.
Gotcha.
Okay?
Definitely.
So that's kind of exactly what happened with us. I saw a podcast not long ago. There was an offensive lineman from the University of Georgia. And by the way, I'm a Florida State fan, but, I like good football.
Right.
I like when you see stuff.
Gotcha.
And I think the offensive lineman said something that was so profound, and it's exactly what happened with some of the teams that we had, and I had never been able to verbalize it. So they were on the podcast, and he did a shout-out to the guys being recruited by the University of Georgia. He said, listen, if you're trying to have a good time, if you're trying to have a lot of time to yourself, if you're trying to chill and take advantage of all the activities that the students do on campus, do not come to the University of Georgia.
Okay.
It's not for you.
Gotcha.
That's not what we do. Now, if you're trying to win championships, if you're trying to increase your draft stock, if you're trying to become a great team, if you're trying to win SEC, national championships, and you ready to put that work in, this is where you want to be.
Gotcha.
Now, that wasn't a coach talking.
Right.
That wasn't somebody reporting on them. This is a player that's on the roster.
Right.
And he's basically telling you our culture is championship culture.
Gotcha.
And so I'm telling all of you potential teammates that may be thinking about coming to Georgia, here's what you better really consider, because here's what's going to happen at the University of Georgia.
Gotcha.
So this guy, along with his teammates, are holding each other accountable because they believe in it.
Gotcha.
And what he is tied into is the hard work and dedication into the success that they're having. And because of that, it's just a matter of the coaches, hey, man, this is what we are about. Gotcha. This is how we got where we got. This is why we're on this winning streak. This is why we're 2-time national champions, because this is what we do. We're not coming off of this for anybody. You hear Coach Saban say the standards are the standards.
Exactly.
And that's what happened with the Laney teams. I go back to the J.K. Sabbs. I go back to the Rod Briscoes.
Yeah.
I go back to – we're boys, but you're not fixing to mess up my winning.
Right.
And the culture is that in that locker room, there have been times where they've asked me to step out of the locker room because they needed to handle some stuff.
Gotcha.
And so, I think that's what you saw in the year 2000. In the year 2000, when you had the Brandon Fuse and the Latrey Walkers the Nick Figs, and I could just go Bakari Thurman. They did a great job of understanding we're boys, we're going to hang out, but inside these lines, it's about business.
Gotcha.
It's about winning. And so I'm not going to take credit for that. I think we kind of planted the seed, but once our guys took off with that mentality, and I can go all the way through Robert Dunn, and people that's been on the team understand this. man, you know, sometimes guys had to square up over the standards, you know.
Yeah,
there were times where, you know, you had to be called out.
Coach, and as you said, I walked into it on a college level. When you talk about standard in culture, the coaches set the standard, but the coaches set the standard, but the culture of it is embraced by the players.
And enforced.
By the players. So, you know, I'm coming from a Tusculum. That's a Division II school.
Yeah.
And I kind of over-exceeded, you know, the division. I feel like I wasn't a Division II player. So then when I stepped on the D1 level, I still had a hard-working mentality. But those guys at App State made it clear to me that this is App State. We beat Michigan for a reason, not because we just beat them. We beat Michigan well before we beat Michigan.
Right.
And this is Coach Satterfield's standard.
Yep.
And as older players, we're going to set the culture. And I kind of fell in line right in with that. But like you said, the culture is enforced by the players. And when you see that and you have that, those teams are more successful than
right. So when a coach stands up and just goes off about the standards, everybody in that locker room feels like, okay, that's his job. That's what he's supposed to do. No big deal. I'll just do enough to keep him from coming down hard on me. But when my peers, when my teammates stand up and they go off about the standards, that's different. That's different. That means more. And I remember Chuck Daly saying that about Isaiah Thomas. He said Isaiah Thomas could handle more stuff in 10 minutes in the locker room than I could in 10 practices.
Gotcha.
Because as the peer, as the captain of the team, when he spoke, it was no longer, oh, here we go again. It was, no, this is the gospel truth of how we're gonna do things. So yeah, you know, recruiting those guys on your side and getting them to be a major part of the decision making and the standards bearer is what happened to us starting in 2000 at Laney.
Gotcha.
And it was understood. If you walked into that locker room, you got that speech from the players. We don't do that here. This is how we do things.
Gotcha.
And it got to a point where I didn't even have to handle it. I just had to enforce it.
Just enforce it, yeah. And the players, they enforce it. You set the standard, and the players enforce the culture. Right. Like you said, you've seen it, Coach, from, you know, like you said, starting to win in 2000, making a run in 2002. And then going back to the semifinal in 2004, and then just winning a plethora of games and being big playoff runs all the way up until you get ready, till you decide to leave in 07.
Yeah.
So, you know, so after 10 seasons, you know, 2 region championships, 2 trips to the Dome, you decide to take your talents out to Waynesboro, Burke County High School. So, you know, when you build something from the ground like you done at Laney, sometimes it's hard to depart.
It is.
So what kind of led you to the decision to make that hard decision to go to Burke County?
Okay, so I'm not going to even try to sugarcoat it. It was just a much better opportunity for me and my family when it came to financial.
Okay, gotcha.
It was also a chance to have autonomy of being in a school where there was only one school in that county.
Right.
We were not held to the same, you know, rules and levels that 7 other high schools were being held to.
Right.
And let me stop right here and say this. I'm still grateful to Richmond County and to the Laney community for allowing me to be a head coach, because the truth of the matter is, at the time I became a head coach, I don't know if there were very many jobs in the state that would have hired me as a head coach.
Gotcha.
They gave me an opportunity to prove that I could do this. And I just hope that the lives that I was able to touch there, I hope that the success that we had is still going to be a part of their rich tradition and history.
Right.
I hope that they see it as something positive. But yeah, it's like, you know, at the end of the day too, some of it becomes a job.
Yeah.
We all get our credentials, we all go into a career, and we're looking for opportunities to move along and to maximize.
Right.
And that's what happened with Burke County. And it was a lot like going into the Laney situation. What I saw was just potential that I thought was great.
Right.
But this time going in, I understood going in that potential means nothing unless you can get those guys believing in it and having the same vision.
Right.
And so it didn't take long at Burke to do that.
Right.
You know, and I took over a situation that was really good. The coach that was there before me had done a really good job of instilling discipline. Guys didn't think that they could miss practice. They came to workouts. They understood every day we were going to lift and try to get better.
Right.
And so, my job was to go in and just try to build upon that and make that a little bit better.
Right.
And so, when we got a chance to leave, and I think Burke has really hired a guy that's going to be able to do the same thing, Coach Stevens. I think he's going to take what we have done, and I think he's going to be able to start at a high level, and I think he's going to be able to take it, and he's going to take it even further, you know. So that's the way that worked, man. And those were the two places, and boy, I still have great relationships with the coaches and the players that played for me. I still talk to them. They still check up on me.
Right.
So, it's been an awesome run for those 26 years, 10 at Laney and 16 at Burke as the head coach.
And when you talk about, having those, player relationships, man, and many won't know this, and this might be the first time I said this on the podcast. So, I knew J.K. Sapp pretty well as a young guy. So he was a guy that had kind of come around Laney a few times. We kind of seen him seen him a lot in the JV championships and stuff like that. It's kind of post after you left. It's more of the Coach Lackey era in the beginning. And he's the guy that was trying to kind of steer me away from Richmond. Yeah. But I had kind of it was like, man, I got out the mud with these guys. I see where Richmond had come from. Yeah. And now was building into a contender. Yeah. And he was like, man, you come down here to two-way, you're gonna dominate. Because I was dominated on that 4-11. It was 6. I think I had 7 interceptions that junior year. 6 in the senior year. That was even before the playoffs. And I kind of wanted to be thrusting into that Laney culture, something that you had built and Coach Lackey had continued on after you left. But like you said, Aunt Laney took that program over, was kind of at the bottom. But Burke County was a little different situation, had seen some success, making a state championship run back in '97. Yeah. And didn't win it, but like you said, enforcing that coach, and had a lot of success after that, just making, maybe not deep playoff runs, but winning maybe a regional title, getting into the playoffs, just kind of having some success there that you could build off of, something you could work with. You didn't have to really start from the ground. Right. You know what I mean? So, you get there in 07, man, and you guys start working. And in 2010, you guys make it to the semifinals. And in 2011, you guys win it. So kind of just tell us about those 2 years there where you guys kind of seen a high level of success. Because you guys were successful before then as well in the years of building up to it. But in those 2 years, 2010, these guys are coming. Yeah. And in 2011, they get it done.
Well, to win a championship, and we talked about this briefly a little earlier in the podcast, is that, it has to almost be the perfect storm. Gotcha. Everything has to line up almost perfectly. And so we had some really good teams, 2007, 2008, 2009. Right. 2010, I'm not even sure if that was one of our best teams. But things lined up right. We had a little bit of everything. We didn't have any glaring weaknesses. Gotcha. And we pulled a major upset in the second round. Mm-hmm. We beat Baldwin in the second round. Yeah, they had beaten us earlier in the year, and they were pretty good. Big play in the ball game. We punt the ball, and their punt returner fumbles it deep in their own territory. Gotcha. Chances are, if he catches that, they run the clock out, win the ball game. But he fumbled it. We get on it. We score, get the 2-point conversion, win the ball game. Gotcha. Okay, so, again, I'm not a believer in luck. I believe in opportunity. And, the opportunity presented itself, and we were able to take advantage of it, and we went to the semifinals. And to be honest with you, we probably overachieved. Gotcha. Well, when we get to the semifinals, we go out to play Carrollton, and, we had, for the first time, really started to feel ourselves. This is the semifinals of the state. Right. State media is coming through. Man, we just, we're feeling us, and we go over to Carrollton, and they just take us out back and spank our behind. Gotcha. And, the good thing is we're bringing probably 90% of the team back. Right. But again, that was an opportunity to present standards. All right, you got there. We saw what level of ball got played, and we saw the intensity. Right. We saw that those guys came out of there, and they wasn't playing any games whatsoever. Gotcha. If we're going to get over that hump, that's our mentality. Gotcha. And so that offseason, we went to work. A lot of the team came back. We went back. We was able to win the state championship. In 2012, we have quite a few of the guys back. Right. And pretty much all year long, people was like, all right, it's going to come down to Burke and Sandy Creek. And this is what happens when we talk about things have to line up right. The way the brackets worked out, we were number 1. Sandy Creek was number 1. We were in the same bracket and had to meet in the quarterfinals. Yeah. So it's a heck of a ball game. We take an injury early in the ball game that really hurts our game plan. Sandy Creek is really, really good. Got a couple of Division I guys, SEC guys playing. They ended up beating us. I want to say they may have beaten us 10 points. Scored a touchdown late. Won the ball game. Keeps us from repeating. But, like I said, that was kind of what happened. And then we went on to win the region championship like the next 3 years in a row. Mm-hmm. And then would make it to the quarterfinals or whatever. So, it was a great run, man.
Yeah,
it was.
It definitely was, Coach.
And I told people back in 2011, I didn't really realize how prophetic I was, is that when you start talking about these one-county schools, it was going to get really, really hard when you start getting a 3A and quad A and above to win a championship.
Right.
Just simply because we were taking the kids that was born and raised in our place, and we were going to have to play against people that were, okay, I need a linebacker. Let me go down the street and find one and bring him in.
Right.
And I know folks don't like to hear that, but that's exactly what's happening. That's the landscape of high school football now.
Yeah.
And so in 2012, 2013, you really started to see it.
That, yeah.
And you started to see where a lot of these guys playing 7-on-7 together started going to the same high school. Yeah. So, like I said, that was pretty much our run at Burke. And, man, we had a great time doing it. And the one thing, too, that I can't get out of here without saying, the culture at Laney, I'm not just talking about the football culture, but when you start talking about the band and you start talking about the alumni,
the community support,
and you start talking about the fans coming in,
right?
Man, Laney truly had a good HBCU feel to it.
Yeah,
it did. It was just
it kind of resembled what Josie was in the mid-90s.
Right.
When you talked about the band, when you talked about the football team and the following of the community, and how the community poured back into the program.
Right.
Not only the alumni, but the surrounding community. When you talk about this, other schools coming out to support Josie, many schools were coming out and supporting Laney when they went to the Dome. I remember, watching it as a kid, Laney in the Dome, and everybody was watching and rooting for Laney.
Right.
It just wasn't Laney. It was Josie. It was Richmond. It was Westside. Yeah. Everybody's cheering his team on, and the community just kind of surrounded.
They did. They embraced us, and then the pride that's associated with the alumni of Laney. You know what that culture is all about for years and years. It runs deep. Yeah. So, I'll never forget. This is one of the funniest things. We go down in, I'm gonna say it's 2004. And we're on the road playing Vidalia. Vidalia is undefeated. They are hands down supposed to be the state champs.
Gotcha.
And so we get down to Vidalia, and we had a pretty good team. Robert Dunn was on that team. Some of the other guys. And, man, their student section is great, but their student section really started to rib our guys. Y'all better take that stuff back to Augusta. And so now you got to understand, the guys I put on the bus at Laney,
it's a little different.
We was for whatever you wanted to do,
it's a little different
when that happened and they started playing some of that music, I remember they started playing Head Buster, which I think probably intimidated most teams.
Right.
So now we got to get our kids back in the locker room because they ready to go play the game with old street fight mentality, let's go do it, man.
Right.
And so I remember us playing, and they scored first, and then we scored, whatever. But the Vidalia coaches later on, we all became really good friends because we run in the same circle. They move around, go other places. So I had one tell me, he said, man, you know what? We were good. Think we was going to beat y'all. And then y'all's band showed up. Your band got there late. He said, when that band crunk up, man, wasn't nothing we could do. So, it was a culture.
You had them outside.
Our kids would feed on that energy. And the success at Laney was definitely a community success. Right. And the same thing happened at Burke. It did, small town, high school football. Nothing else to do on Friday nights,
And that's kind of what I wanted to kind of harp on next, Coach. After 16 seasons, 138 wins, 7 region championships, of course, the state championship in 2011. When you're talking about Burke County and we're talking about now the rural South and kind of the atmosphere in what we're living in today when you talk about racial divides.
Right.
How did the football program at Burke County kind of bring that county and that city together? And I talked about it with Coach Youngblood because Thomson was probably in the same racially divided, but the football program brought it all together. So how did that work for you at Burke County?
Well, I don't even think that it's just racial. I think you can look at political. I think you might even look at religious, different philosophies. But at 7:30 on Friday night, everybody was a Burke County Bear.
Gotcha.
And so that was for a couple of hours the only time that you could get black, white, rich, poor, Republican, Democrat to put all of that philosophy to the side.
Was on Friday night.
And sit there together and cheer together. And this is really a shame.
Right.
We don't even do that on Sundays because we're still racially divided in our churches and everything else.
We're racially divided.
Yeah. So, when you start talking about small town high school football, that is probably one of the biggest sources of community pride that you're going to find anywhere.
Gotcha.
And that's why I say I get on my soapbox very often. That's why I think athletics is great. That's why I think it's really, really important.
Right.
Because when you start talking about what can happen when people put some things aside and just join together in unity, how much pride, how much success can be had. And I also tell a lot of my friends who've moved on to be school administrators, if you have the opportunity to have a great athletic program, football, basketball, baseball, whatever, and you don't ride that till the wheels fall off, I think you're making a big mistake.
Gotcha.
I think that's the opportunity you've got where everybody is on the same page, pulling the same way.
Right.
Let's use it to our advantage. And that certainly happened at Burke County. That was Go Bears. Everybody
believed in that.
Yeah, that's what everybody believed. It was on signs in town.
Yeah.
People had the signs in their yard.
Right.
And so, on Saturday morning, like this time,
everybody reading.
Man, if I had to go to Walmart,
Yeah.
I might as well just go ahead and have a press conference right there in the parking lot because we got to
everybody
talk
wanna
about
hear
the
from
game.
you.
Yeah, we got to talk about the
everybody wanna hear
game
from
from Friday. And I loved it now. I'm not complaining at all.
Yeah.
So, that's small town high school football.
Right.
That's what I grew up with. That was always a goal of mine to be in charge of a program like that, which had a lot to do with me going to Burke County as well.
Right. Kind of want to resemble where you come from.
Yeah. And
Gotcha.
it was absolutely awesome, man.
Gotcha.
And I'm just so thankful and blessed for the opportunity to do that for 16 years.
Right. And so, Coach, when you talk about, you talk about before we started, 33 years of coaching, Coach. And as a head football coach, 208 wins, 9 region championships. Of course, like we just stated, the state championship in 2011. Now that you're a retired coach, looking back in hindsight, what does it all mean to you now?
Well, let me tell you what it means to me. 208 wins, however many region championships. And the question I have for people is, guess how many touchdowns I scored? Guess how many tackles I had?
Yeah.
Guess how many pass breakups or interceptions I had? I didn't call very many offensive plays at Burke. Now, I was the offensive coordinator at Laney. I called very few defenses. So what I see is I see a collective effort by a lot of people that I had to empower. And the only way I could have the success I had as a coach is I had to depend on a bunch of men and a bunch of guys to really just focus in on a common goal.
Right.
It is so not about me.
Gotcha.
If I'm going to take credit for anything, it's just that I empowered the right people. I put the right people in position to make plays. And because of that, man, I get a lot of credit. And so, I think that that's one of those fundamental things, again, of athletics and of team sports that I absolutely love. There are some guys somewhere that have barely won 10, 20 ball games that are much better football coaches than I was.
Right.
Okay. They understood defensive, offensive concepts better than I did, probably.
Right.
But the one thing that I would tell you is that if you're going to have success doing what I did, it's going to be on the backs of some other people. And because of that now, and this is big to me to this day, because of that, I used to be up front with my kids and my coaches. What I used to tell them is listen, I'm going to take you
Right.
I'm going to train you. I'm going to get you as big and as fast and as strong as I can. But at the end of the day, I'm going to use you to have success. If you don't turn around and use me,
right,
that's on you. That's your fault.
Gotcha. I got you, Coach. And like you said, you got to put people around you. You got to put people around you that make you more successful.
Right.
You know what I mean? You got to have that.
No doubt.
Got to have that.
And you got to let them do it.
Yeah. So, Coach, we're in October here now. We're starting to wrap things up. We're in October here now, and we're coming up on an anniversary of something that's personal, not too personal, not to dive into it too much. But this time, almost last year, man, you're down in Wayne County. You have your health scare, and it's it's a touchy situation.
Yeah.
But now looking back a year, how has that just been a blessing, or just something that you've learned for to be a positive now?
All right, so I'm going to try to put this short because I know we're short on time. But let me tell you the biggest thing that it did, and I make no bones about it. That was the Lord giving me something that I really needed.
Okay.
When I was laying on that ground and I was not breathing and my heart wasn't beating, I was at a situation where it could have gone either way.
Gotcha.
All right. The Lord brought me back. And here's the biggest thing that he showed me. When you were laying on that ground, there were some things that was never going to matter again. But there were some things that were going to survive you. Your family was going to survive you. Your kids that played for you, your coaches were going to survive you. Your wife was going to survive you. And then ultimately, you were going to have to face judgment. How much time have you spent on those things, making them better?
Right.
Because even though you would be physically gone, they have to go on or they have to happen.
Gotcha.
You sure spent a lot of time, and this is what was being internalized. You sure spent a lot of time on things that's not going to survive, that won't matter anymore. So what I had to learn is that where we put our time is very, very important. And I had not always prioritized my stuff the way it should have been prioritized.
Gotcha.
And the Lord showed me that. And he showed me that so that I can do better. There are things that when I am gone, somebody's got to continue to live. Somebody's got to continue to survive that was dependent on me. Am I fostering relationships? Am I helping them to be better people? Am I helping them to be able to move on?
Right.
Am I helping myself so that when I see the Lord, he's going to be able to be pleased with what I did?
Right.
Or am I chasing these wins? Or am I trying to collect these rings and these state championship trophies, which are that they're important, but they're not more important than the things that are going to survive. And that's the message that I'm giving to everybody now. Gotcha. Man, make sure that as you prioritize, you do it by deciding or figuring out what is going to happen if you're no longer here.
Right.
You have a chance to affect those things now. You better do it. Don't spend all your time chasing these things that's going to pass away.
Gotcha.
So that was the big thing that happened with me. And then the other thing is it was time to call it quits. I don't know if I'd have had the smarts or the courage to do it, but the Lord took that in his own hands, and it became obvious that it was time for me to let it go. Everything has an expiration date.
Exactly.
I had 33 great years,
right,
but man, it was time to go.
Right. I mean, I understand. Sometimes, Coach, you gotta know when it's time to hang it up, time to go. And Coach, in closing, just want to get into your endeavor now. CP off the bench ministries, something that you've I've kind of stayed close and watched.
Yeah.
Like I said, you're a man of great faith. I'm a person of, trying to grow in my faith. So I kind of watch those people that's out just preaching and teaching a good message. So just kind of give us a little insight on CP off the bench and what's that's about and what is time to steer.
Well, CP off the bench is kind of comes from what we just got through talking about. So much of my life involved me just sitting on the bench. There were things that I could have been doing. There are things that I should have been doing, and I was just perfectly happy. We used to call them those ERWs. They get on the bus, they eat pregame meal, they ride to the game, and they just watch, and they were perfectly happy.
Right.
And sometimes you get mad because some of those ERWs, eat, ride, watch guys actually had potential to be helping, but they just didn't have the motivation to do it.
Right.
And I feel like when it came to some of the things that I should have been doing, I was just kind of an ERW. just let it go. I'll just, sit over here on the bench. I'll be perfectly happy. And so what the Lord told me after my whole health scare and ordeal is it's time to get off the bench, man. It's time for you to get into this game.
Okay.
You have hundreds of people, if not thousands of people that actually listen to you. What are you telling them?
Gotcha.
And so I wasn't telling them much, and that's why I came with the whole CP off the bench. And my thing is real clear. All of us, when we live and we make decisions, we have to do it based off a source of wisdom.
Gotcha.
What source are we using? And so what I'm encouraging everybody to do is to really get involved in the gospel, because the Lord has a set of wisdom that's his.
Gotcha.
The world has a set of wisdom that's theirs. That's
Right.
what you go to social media and they tell you how to be successful and take care of me first and match energies. And see, that is contrary to what the Lord tells us.
Gotcha.
And when we operate off his set of wisdom, then it brings about some things like peace, contentment. Man, have you ever just been in a situation where things were going okay? You can't put your finger on anything being bad, but you just wasn't content.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Like it's something
I've definitely
missing,
been there.
man. That's because we're basing our success on what the world tells us should be success.
Right.
And when we can switch over, and this is what the whole CP off the bench message is about, when we can switch over and we can tune into God's wisdom and we understand what his success is about, like coming on a podcast and making sure people understand the difference, then you get a chance to have those things that he promised. And he promised contentment, he can promise peace.
Right.
Man, whatever situation you're in, you don't even have to be in control of it. That's next level peace and contentment. So that's
Right.
what the whole CP off the bench is about.
Right.
And I really target young men,
Gotcha.
because I know what happens with men. I know you're newly married, but man, it just comes time where the pressure comes down. It's when we get in the car and we ride home real slow and, we sitting here, we got things on our mind.
I've taken those rides for sure.
Yeah, but we don't have to be in it by ourselves.
Gotcha.
And that is the message for CP off the bench. And it's really taken off. I've gotten a chance to go and talk to groups. As a matter of fact, I'm going down doing something with Georgia Southern on Thursday.
Okay.
I'm going to talk with their coaches in their coaches Bible study. I'm excited about that. I'm just thankful for the Lord for putting me in those positions.
Gotcha.
And the thing that I remember is not about me. I just have to give them what he says. And so, that's the whole CP off the bench deal. And man, we're having a ball with it.
Coach.
And I've never been as happy in my life.
Yeah, Coach, that's great, man. Like you said, CP off the bench, getting off the bench, influencing us and teaching us things outside of what we're chasing on the worldly side. So, Coach, just in our closing, man, this has been great. You're a person that, like you said, been around many athletes, coaches, parents, community leaders, have touched so many people around the community all over the state of Georgia, and it probably afar off as well.
Right.
You've experienced a lot of success in your life, and your faith has probably been based in that, being faithful and, that success has helped you get you to this point. So, Coach, what would just be your advice, not only to a young person, but to an adult that's chasing success? What would be your advice to them?
I think it ties into what we just got through talking about. You have to have a great vision of what true success is.
Right. Vision.
Don't let the wrong people give you this concept of success, because you'll never reach it.
Right.
It'll never be enough. So what I would tell you is to really base your success on what the Lord tells us success is.
Gotcha.
It looks totally different than a lot of the stuff we've been told.
Right.
That would be my advice to anybody.
Right.
And, I really wish that I would have listened to the people that tried to tell me this 20 years ago. I didn't. I just had this mindset. And you know what happens with that success? Success is always tied into something in the future. When I get this amount of money, when I get to this point in my relationship, when I have this status on my job, it's going to always be when I get, when I have, instead of where the Lord has me right now. That's my message to everybody. Right. Understand what true success is.
Right. Like you said, Coach, having that vision and understanding what true success is. And like you said, Coach, living in the right now, because sometimes in life we plan for all of these things in the future. but you may not even live to see that day.
And what
You gotta live
happens
for
is,
right
man,
now.
society keeps moving the finish line.
Yeah.
As soon as you get there, I look back now and think about 20 years ago when I was talking about all the things. When I get to that point, I'm going to be happy. And man, I've surpassed all of those things.
Right.
And yet, and still, it would still not be enough if I was trying to base it on what I needed material-wise or financially, or it's like, man, I see people physically. Well, I need to do this. When I get to this, I'll be satisfied. Well, as soon as they get to that point, then they're trying to do something else because, like I say, the finish line is going to always move.
Push yourself back. Yeah. Coach, this has been great, man.
Man, I've enjoyed it, man.
So many words of wisdom here. So many, just from the football realm to to life, to your religion and faith. And this has been great. It was something I think that we may have to sit and do it again. When I sit and listen to your coach, I'm like, man, I like to hear him talk, man. I like to hear him. So
anytime, man, anytime.
So, man,
and I got guys, man, that I call, and they have to drop some wisdom on me. This is what brothers do for each other.
Great,
this
man.
is what we ought to be doing. Yeah.
And like you said, we should just drop it on each other. From you being older than me here, learning from you, and then you guys learning from me. Being a little older. And I take it there, man. So, Coach, I just want to say thank you for your time this morning.
Appreciate you having me.
I definitely appreciate it. Here, this is a Press Coverage Podcast, man. This is episode 19. I'm sitting here with former Lucy Laney coach, former Burke County head coach, state champion head coach, and now the voice of CP off the bench, Coach Eric Parker. Thank you again, man.
Thank you.
Hey, we're signing out. Appreciate you. We're out of here.
Hey, this is a song for my haters. Yeah, you got me feeling like the greatest.